Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Hobby Chop Podcast, the podcast for the people. If you have questions you want answered, ideas for episode topics, join the Hobby Chop Podcast Facebook group. Leave a comment, a question. You never know. Your idea just may be our next episode. Welcome. You have me, Big Ken. You have Zip. We have Tyler. And today we have our very first Hobby Chop podcast guest. Welcome, Chris McGill from Card Ladder. Chris, how you doing?
Doing great. The first guest on the podcast for the people. I like that.
Podcast for the people. And the other fellas there. How you guys doing tonight?
Good. Some may say you're the people's champ then. I don't know.
Doing well. Still recovering from the weekend, I think.
Yeah. We had quite a show up at the Causeway up in Boston this past weekend, and it was a one-day show. Could you imagine if that was a two-day show? Holy cow! How would we feel?
I'd have been worn out. Even worse.
So, Chris, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you on. How are you? What's new? What's going on with you?
I'm doing very well. I'm getting ready for the NBA playoffs to start. That always ends up just consuming me, and I don't really get much work done. So we got that coming up. Other than that, man, I'm just steady as she goes.
Yeah, and that's been you, right? Every year since I met you, when it comes around the NBA playoffs, it's like that's it. There's nothing else going on. Right, it's tunnel vision.
It is. I think it's been a pretty good NBA season. It was a pretty good NFL season.
Yeah,
we've had some good sports luck, I think, the last few years.
Yeah. So as we head into these playoffs, I mean, we just had the NBA All-Star Weekend a few weekends ago, so it's like full steam ahead to the playoffs. Market upside, players, who you looking at? What do you think?
Yeah. So, all right. I've broken my answer into two segments here, and just jump in if I say something that provokes a thought. But I've broken it up into two segments here. First, I'm going to give you three players who are kind of maybe players I think could gain some appreciation in the playoffs this year for various reasons. And then I've also got three players whose markets have gone up a ton already this year. And so just bear in mind that the last three also could apply to the first three. It just sort of follows that guys who are doing really well during the regular season are on good teams and are having good seasons. So, but we're going to save those three. Let me give you the first three players who I think could have some upside in the postseason. I'm going to tell you right now, these are three curveballs. I don't think you guys are expecting any of these names. So I'm going to disappoint Zip right off the bat. There's not going to be any Tatum. There's not going to be any Jaylen Brown here. Okay, these are some curveballs coming. Here's the first. This is probably the biggest. No, this is the second biggest curveball. The first guy is Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Buckets. Jimmy Butler, by my count, and I do a lot of digging into the stats and the history of basketball statistics. I have a little spreadsheet that you can look at. It's on a website called thebestplayerontheplanet.com. And for every single year, I just track the statistical performance of players and rank them, basically. I won't go into the methodology, but Jimmy Butler has been a top 5 player in 4 out of the last 5 seasons. And his performance is just perennially overlooked and underrated. Part of it is a personality issue. Part of it is being on the Miami Heat. Part of it is even when he made the finals against the Nuggets and the Lakers, the Miami Heat really never stood a chance. But I think all that changes for Jimmy now that he's on the Golden State Warriors. And you have this whole Bay Area fan base and collector base that's getting their first exposure to him. Mm-hmm. And since joining the Warriors, I think he's 9-1 now, maybe 8-2. He has a plus minus when he's on court per 100 possessions of about +9. It's the best of any Warriors player this year by a wide margin. He's making a huge impact as soon as he got there. And the thing about him is that he goes up another level or two when the playoffs come around. Yeah. So I think there's a real chance that Jimmy Butler can have a really strong run in these playoffs, and he can engender a whole new fan base of people who are going to appreciate and understand his game and really see it for the first time in the Bay.
Yeah, he was this was a team that was going to the playoffs anyways, right? And now he's just made them that much better. And fan base, right? So important. So important for a player like him, especially a new guy that shows up and he's making your team better.
Well, I'm happy he's in the West, man. As a Celtics fan, oh my God, it's always just been Jimmy Butler, the thorn in the side. It's like this. He was like the kryptonite for the Celtics. It felt like for like years, and him being gone over there, good riddance and good luck. But that's the last thing he really needs. He's shown dominance in the playoffs for years, right? Especially like that fourth quarter Jimmy in the playoffs is like a different animal altogether. So yeah, you get him in a great fit. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But when I was thinking about, like, I was expecting for prospects. So you come out with Jimmy Butler, guy already established and statistically, like you had just backed up a great player. Yeah, didn't see that coming, but I see it now. It makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm still intrigued by Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green together in playoff pressure. It might be quite the they'll either work brilliantly or be some fireworks, that's for sure.
Oh, there's going to be fireworks. There's going to be that timeout, fourth quarter of game 3 of round 1, and somebody's going to get punched in the face.
Absolutely possible.
That's how they
roll. This time, Butler won't drop like a sack of potatoes like Poole did, and he'll just punch back, though. That's the difference. It will be a brawl. Like, it will just be back and forth. It won't just be a sucker punch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll be more of a fair fight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let me give you my second guy. Now, this guy is definitely in the prospects bucket, but I also think this is going to be the biggest curveball. There are some other, like I said, the next 3 guys I'm going to mention, they're more prospect-y. But this guy's like a real long shot. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form advising that this guy's cards are going to do well or anything like that. But he's just the guy who popped up when I was doing research to prepare for this segment. And the more I dug into it, the more interesting it became. And the guy is Santi Aldama of the Memphis Grizzlies. So he's only started like 12 games for the Grizzlies this year. But he's been a solid rotational player for them. He's maybe like 5th and 6th man of the year odds. I mean, this guy flies completely under the radar, but he's having a very underrated 4th season. But the thing that made him stand out to me was I was looking at Basketball Reference's catch-all metric called box plus minus, and Aldama is 18th in that statistic, 18th of the entire league of 450 players. He's right there statistically in the box plus minus metric around Anthony Edwards in that tier. Now, he doesn't play as many minutes as Edwards. He doesn't have as important of a role as Edwards, obviously. He doesn't put up the volume that Edwards puts up, but he is averaging about 13, 6, and 3. He's shooting about 38% from deep. He's just an efficient player. That's why the metrics like him. And he also has the Spain connection going on. So he's from Spain. He had a nice performance with them at the Olympics most recently, or maybe it was FIBA. I can't remember, but I do remember watching him during one of those summer tournaments and being kind of impressed. It just seems like he's a guy who's really impacting Memphis, even as they've been weathering a lot of injuries and a lot of setbacks that they've had this year. He's been a steady, constant force for them. So I'm just throwing him out there because he's super long shot. His cards are dirt cheap. Not saying that he's a buy or anything like that, but he's just a guy who really he stuck out when I looked at the stats and the metrics, and he's on a good team. Nobody would be surprised if the Grizzlies went to the second round or even the conference finals. So there's my big curve. There's my knuckleball, Santi Aldama of the Grizzlies.
I'll tell you what. I just Googled him. This little snapshot of Google, right? He fits the Euro player profile. He's a 7-footer. Just against the Spurs, his stat line was 15 points, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds, filling up the stat sheet. And so basically what you're telling everyone here is that if he gets more minutes, he's basically Anthony Edwards at 7 feet.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this guy is a high impact player. He's in his 4th season, and it's tough making that cultural adjustment. I just think that for as far as long shots go, if I was looking at a long shot, he checks a lot of boxes that I'd want to check.
Yeah, Memphis is really interesting overall, right? I know they play very fast, and they'll give a lot of folks problems because they do have a lot of ways they can beat you. I know Desmond Bain's been playing really well as well. I think he really went off, I think, against Atlanta. But yeah, they'll be interesting in the playoffs. So I could certainly see nearly anybody, a lot of people popping for them. I'm always on the look for Zach Edey cards just because my best friend's son loves Zach Edey, so I always buy them for him and ship them.
I like
back
Zach
to
Edey too, by the way. Cool.
Yeah. And what you just said, there's like a group of teams that it just seems like they're just loaded with young talent. And it's almost like one of those guys gets traded somewhere else where they even can expand in a role. And you could see that. And like guys that like teams like that just, I mean, OKC like 2 years ago, like it was like, oh, wait till, and now they're here, right? Or 3 years ago, maybe. And then you have the Rockets and the Pistons that I kind of feel like are just loaded with young guys. You know what I mean? And the Grizzlies seemingly have just been like that, like for it feels like forever in basketball life. But yeah, just another guy in their Grizzlies bench that's a sleeper stud, right? It's interesting.
I have to say, I knew it was a curveball. I don't watch a lot of basketball, but as soon as you dropped the name, I watched my two co-hosts go right to their faces turned and they started pounding away on the keyboard. So I knew right there because there's two guys that watch basketball. And when you dropped the name and they both had to go get information, I said, I don't feel so bad.
Well, Ken, I went over to Card Ladder when I was looking into this before coming on, and I just said, what's Santi Aldama's highest selling card? I was curious. And he had his rookie year Prism Black Shimmer. Well, let me ask you. Let me turn this into a game. Give a guess? What do you think it sold for?
The Shimmer.
Yeah.
When did it sell?
Oh man, I think this was a year or two ago.
Okay. $1,600.
Okay.
I'm going to say something silly low, like $380.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
And you're laughing, but I would probably think now I don't know. I'd probably even say lower than that. I'm going to say 250. Go ahead.
All right. Well, the sale was from 2022. Okay. So I just went and checked. $3,000.
Wow.
Okay.
$3,000 for Aldama's highest selling card ever. So I mean, it is the basketball market where, like, especially like guys like brand new. I mean, he was just a rookie that season. So, you know,
I mean, there was
he a good prospect coming out?
I don't remember him being touted at all, to be honest with you.
I don't either. That's why I'm real.
But like, people will drop a few grand on the most random no-name rookies Prism 1 of 1. I mean, I remember back in the 2019-2020 era, Christina and I opened a box of Prism Hobby Choice, and we hit the Nebula 1 of 1 of a kid named Jalen Hands, who was drafted by Brooklyn, but nobody ever heard of this guy, and he obviously didn't have any sort of career in the NBA. But remember, this is pre-COVID and pre-pandemic by a year or two, and we still were able to get, I think, $600-$700 for that card. Oh. There's always been people who, you know, there's always maybe the right buyer. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was his mom buying the card.
That's crazy. I just looked up his out of 5 logo man just like 2 weeks ago did $1,800.
2
so
weeks.
You could have bought that for $1,800 in a PSA 8.
Oh my gosh, we might be late to the party here.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Wow. Okay, and then so I gave you guys let's say I gave you guys a curveball and then I gave you a knuckleball. Now I'm going to give you a fastball right down the center of the plate. LeBron James. LeBron James was just named Western Conference Player of the Month, which that doesn't mean he's going to win MVP or anything this year, but normally there's a pretty strong correlation between the player who wins the most Player of the Month awards and who gets MVP. So like in other words, he is playing at an MVP level, at least for the last month. Now he's got a really nice co-star on his team, which is Luka. The Lakers are one of, if not the hottest team in the NBA over the last few months. They also have a really good defense right now. there are some stars aligning here suggesting that the Lakers could win it all, or at least that they're a contender. Now that's also a long shot. I mean, I think the odds of the Lakers winning it all on choose your sports book probably like plus 1,000 or more. I mean, they're long odds, 10-1 or worse. But if it were to happen, if LeBron were to win his 5th championship, and especially if he were to win his 5th Finals MVP, you're looking at a summer, an entire offseason of GOAT debates and all sorts of new voices and old voices entering their arguments for why LeBron should be considered the GOAT. I still won't have him as the GOAT. My GOAT metric is just total MVPs, regular season plus finals. That would put LeBron at 9, but MJ still is at 11. But if LeBron were to get to 9, he would have 4 regular season, then he would have 5 finals MVPs, 5 championships. I mean, there's going to be so much fanfare surrounding him, sort of like Brady with the Bucks. And then think about this. People aren't just going to stop and say, oh, he got his 5th finals MVP. What a great career. People are going to say, well, why can't they do it again? LeBron is surrounded by a young team. Luka's in his mid-20s. Austin Reeves is in his mid-20s. And then you got some of the role player guys, Jackson Hayes, Jared Vanderbilt. These guys are in their mid-20s. It's a young, up-and-coming team. It's not super young, but it's a core that could stick together for half a decade. So people are going to look and say, well, why can't LeBron take the summer off, come back, and the Lakers can make another run at it? So there's going to be the combination of improving LeBron's legacy and a whole new cycle of speculation that's going to be baked into what people think LeBron could ultimately become. Mm-hmm. So there's my 3rd and final guy to watch out for upside in the playoffs.
I like the LeBron take a lot. And for me, it's not even just what does the playoffs do to it. I think with retirement imminent, regardless, winning whatever, things that are interesting to me are like 2nd and 3rd year refractors. They're so incredibly cheap, and then when you start to think about like what equivalent cards refractors do for in the Jordan and Kobe markets, like they're just it's a wild discrepancy. Like you can find BGS 9.5 copies of 3rd year low numbered refractors for a couple $100, and I think eventually one of those days those kind of things will catch up. And probably make for a decent long-term investment. Like I picked up a 2nd year black refractor when we were in Atlanta at Culture Collision. As an example.
I mean, yeah, LeBron's chalk, right? Like I know as kind of like a de facto like I guess flipper, if you will. I've never had an issue buying or selling a LeBron James card, that's for sure. So adding to the legacy and then the hype, which is so late in his career, kind of interesting too. Having this whole situation, it's pretty uncharted, right? Like I guess the parallel would be football with Brady, just like this so late career success. And is that dangerous to kind of like look at their markets comparatively, like when he went to the Bucks? I mean, I know there's a whole different situation, but you're talking about championship, and then it kind of, in this situation, it would be like if LeBron won this year and then came back again, right? That would be a very similar situation. I wonder how, looking at that and seeing those numbers popping around, how much it would or wouldn't parallel. It's kind of interesting. But yeah.
And then we have to look at the other side where he just may retire this year too, at the end of the season, right? Or we could be saying all this and he could be, giving his retirement speech.
I think interesting. I think that moves the market in the summertime.
Yeah.
Similar to a playoff performance. Because I think there will be a mad scramble to try to pick off things before that, that retirement market starts to creep up and up.
Yeah.
Okay. How about the 3 markets that have been going really strong?
Let's hear
Give it to us.
All right. So I got 2 basketball and 1 football. So I'll do them in that order. So the first guy up, Zip, you already mentioned him, I think, a little bit earlier, or at least made reference to his team, Cade Cunningham. So
yeah, I said the Pistons. Cade's been unreal. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable. I mean, especially like recently, he's been putting together a month, 2-3 months here. That actually kind of reminds me of when Jason Tatum just sort of broke out. There was just like roughly midway through. God, that must have been like his 4th or his 5th season. He just sort of transformed and from a star to a superstar. And Cade Cunningham is making that type of leap. And there's been narratives surrounding him, sort of hinting that this would happen. I remember he didn't make the Olympic roster last summer, but he did participate in the practice scrimmages against the roster. And Kevin Durant and some of the guys came out afterwards and they were like, Cade Cunningham was the best player on that floor. He was really impressive. And then here he is this season going nuts. So his card letter index is up 105% over the last 3 months. Basically, guys who had Cade Cunningham cards, roughly you can expect that each of them doubled more or less in price over the last 3 months, roughly speaking. So he's having a strong market. He's also obviously, I mean, if Detroit wins a playoff round, I mean, I think the interest in his cards is going to go up even further.
It's just the renaissance of Detroit. This, like all the sports coming to life.
Yeah, except the Lions just got gutted at the head coach position.
Yeah, I we'll see. I know we'll see how that happens. It's just like Detroit out of nowhere. It's just like, hey, we're really good now. I wonder, like with Cade, because like he's the number 1 pick. Like he's been highly touted. Like that was never the issue. I just feel like some of these guys, like you get stuck on these terrible franchises like Detroit, and then the allure of the prospect kind of fades away until something like this happens. Is that fair to say? Like, because that's what it felt like. I've had Cade Cunningham cards before, and I'm like, oh, this guy's awesome, and it's just like they just almost lose that shine, and it's like, look at all these other new shiny prospects that come in, and then your attention gets diverted. So.
Yeah, the Pistons are interesting in general, right? Because it's, obviously Cade is the star, but have the whole roster is very young, right? And a lot of other high draft picks because they have been so terrible, right? Like with Jaden Ivey and Duran and that whole roster, it'll be really interesting to see how if when they get in the playoffs, kind of how that they handle it, and especially Cade in particular, if he handles it very well, he'll go nuclear for sure.
I mean, they're slated, if the playoffs were to start today, to play the Knicks, I think, in the first round. I think that would be the 3-6 matchup. If they were to steal that series, I think there would be a lot of excitement around Cade.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember listening to you back at the beginning of the NBA season. You were on some other content, and you were talking about him then, saying you felt like he was in a position to have a really good year coming off the summer, not being, on that or selected for that Olympic team, and kind of, just like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong type of attitude. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Pistons are overshooting the mark too, by whatever the preseason expectation reasonably was. I mean, right now, I think they've won 9 out of 10 or something like that. I mean, they are rolling right now. If the playoffs were to start today, they're a pretty scary team, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Also, because Alston Thompson's back from injury now as well, and that's another market that's interesting. Is now that he's back and playing well, like he could make a significant jump in the playoffs too.
His
almost correlate with Cade.
Yeah, Amen's market's insane. People are going nuts over him, man. It's crazy.
Didn't he just have a card sell for like $60,000? I want to say.
Thompson? Did he?
I think he did. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not in the ultra high end Amen Thompson game. What card was that?
It must have been one of his big rookies. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I know Osar actually had a really high sale at one point too. They're both
didn't he
good.
Just cross my boy Tatum and like just yam on him like I was watching the game. Yeah, he had a nice little highlight there. Yeah,
with Tatum going cross-eyed for a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So here are 2 huge Amen Thompson sales. His Prism Nebula 1/1 went for 60 grand about a month ago. And then just a few days ago, his Prism Deca Black 1/1 went for 30 grand. So people are laying out some serious coin for Ahmed Thompson.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane.
That scares me, but
so Santi Aldama was a steal at that number.
Maybe. Okay. All right. So here's the other basketball guy I've got, and then I've got a football guy for you. The other basketball guy, I mean, this is so obvious, but it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. His market over the last 3 months is up 81%. It's just been this nonstop climb up and to the right for him over the last few years, and it just gets better and better. You know, I mean, last year he was a bona fide MVP candidate, and the Thunder ended up narrowly getting the 1 seed, and then this year he's better. His stats are better. The team is better. The team is a runaway 1 seed in the West now. They are, I think they have the second shortest title odds after Boston. Maybe they even have the shortest title odds now. I'm not sure, but they are clearly a contender. They are the favorite in the West. He very realistically could win MVP this year and a championship and finals MVP. And then we have to start looking at him as a truly significant historic figure in basketball history. So there's a lot, you know, he's already had a lot baked in, but there's also a lot still to come for him.
Yeah. And then just to add on that, FanDuel, Boston plus 180, Oklahoma plus 190. So it's, yeah. And then it's Cavs plus 600 and then Nuggets something. So that's, you know, but it's pretty much those two are, yeah.
Give me the Nuggets.
Nice, my man.
I was going to say that's just being nice to our guests.
We can pander to the guest on the show of the people.
I'm with you. I love Joker and love the Nuggets. So
nice.
Give me the Nuggets.
Nice. Okay. All right. Let me throw the one football player at you guys. Saquon Barkley, who just had amazing news today, became the highest paid running back in league history and an unprecedented extension for a running back only 1 year into a 3-year deal, and they extended for 2 more after it. His market is up 56% over the last 3 months. And it had been going up during the season too. So like when we only look at the last 3 months, we're sort of missing some of the gains, but yeah, I mean, God, it was one of the best seasons you'll ever see a running back have. Yeah. So I don't think that surprises anybody.
And I'm surprised too. Like I had purchased some Saquon rookie card, like nice rookie cards, and even though his market was way up, I mean, still the running back, they get no love. I mean, you couldn't even compare him to the lowest rookie quarterback. Like starting quarterback out there was probably overselling him by 3 or 4x, right? I mean, what an amazing season he had. And you would think, and you watch this guy perform. I mean, I think the Giants were just suffocating this guy, right? Not letting him do anything. And then he had injuries and everything else. He goes to Philly and he's running away with it, right? And still nothing. Like you can't, like, you buy and sell and it's up 50%, but it's still it's almost not even worth making the investment to sell the card.
I love it. I wonder like how, I mean, probably not actually, but I just picture the GMs like, hey, let's do this for a big middle finger to the Giants. Like you didn't want to pay him, you know, at all. Let's give him an extension after this. Just like, how you like that, Joe Shane? Because like that seems like something petty. Like, I mean, Eagles fans would do that. So, you know, I love it though. That's just good for him. Good for him.
How do you think Minnesota's feeling? They're like, we got Danny Dimes now. He's going for the MVP season next year.
Yeah. Minnesota's got Riches at quarterback, and then the Giants have DeVito. Is that it on their roster?
Yeah, well, you know, they're going to they're definitely going to, they have to draft somebody to come in, but this is not the Giants hour. I don't think anybody wants to hear about the Giants.
No, they don't.
I think I'm just permanently scarred by the running back market.
Yeah.
Like just in general, everything scares me about it. But I can see it, but I keep going back to, and it's a low dollar card, but first time we went to Causeway in January in the middle of the playoffs, I had like that Pop 17 Donruss Blue press proof that is notoriously impossible to grade in a PSA 10. And I could have got like more for like a Aiden O'Connell Prism color PSA 10 than I could get for that card.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's super true. I collect 2 running backs. I collect Le'Veon Bell, who's obviously retired but had a nice little run, and Christian McCaffrey, who's still active. Le'Veon Bell's cards are very low end. Even the nicest of the nicest card is at most going to be $2,000, $3,000, and McCaffrey's a little bit more. But I actually really enjoy that the running backs are pretty cheap, because I'm a huge fan of running backs. Maybe partially because I grew up in the 90s and it was just an era of Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith and Marshall Faulk and all these guys. But I'm a big fan of the position. And hey, if it's cheap, that's great, man. I can actually like build some monster PCs of some of these guys, and it doesn't break the bank.
Yeah. It's nice when your PC guys, right, aren't the highest priced cards, right? So it's good if you want to PC the center or the left tackle or a tight end or something, right?
Yeah.
You're okay. You're okay with those prices.
Santi Aldama PC maybe next.
the random college center out of
oh my god! Do you have those cards at hand? I think it's time to break this to the podcast. This is a great story. Yeah, this is awesome.
So Ken and I are in Culture Collision in Atlanta, and I ripped 2 Prism draft pick hobby boxes, and I pulled 2 numbered Ugonna Onyunsu for Kansas State colored autos. And just at that random moment in time, I decided I was going to start building the rainbow. And then I decided I was going to build the rainbow of both of his autograph collections. And I'm basically all the way there except for the one-on-ones basically at this point. So
that's awesome.
That's awesome. It's I buy stuff for like $3 and it's phenomenal. I can't wait till I send it to PSA and they're going to be like, who the hell is this? And what is this guy grading these for?
What does he know that we don't?
Let's say we got the insider information.
I know, for real.
I got the out of 5 coming in the mail this week. So
yeah.
We're down to the one-on-ones that I may never see in my lifetime, but we're going to hunt them.
Absolutely.
What's your strategy to draw those out? Like how you just wait and hope that they hit your save search?
Yeah, I've got save searches, and then, I put it up in a couple Discords I'm in, and then, shout it out on here eventually, like a little bit just now, and maybe it'll pop up. Who knows? Maybe
I hope it does.
It might be at National. Maybe I find it there. If I'm going to find it live, that's where I'm going to find it. So,
you guys all 3 going to the National?
Yes, I am.
I will.
I have residency for school the week before, so I will not be. Not this one, but I'll miss it. I'll be envious, have FOMO. I'll probably just try to buy a Facebook Marketplace collection so I feel involved in some capacity while I'm at home.
Well, you know what I used to think about when I was a student and the National was going on, and I would have had to travel to it. I would always think, well, this travel is going to cost me a few grand. So I can buy a card if I don't get to go to the National. I can deploy the funds in other ways.
Yeah,
that's a good perspective to have. Absolutely. Yeah.
So Chris, I more kind of a personal question from me, because I'm the WNBA guy here of the group. So Caitlin Clark, like her market is just unstoppable. It just keeps going and going and going. Do we see the WNBA market heating up, like all the players in there, or is it more like just Caitlin or bust at this point?
I think it's undeniable that the Caitlin Clark effect has trickled into the markets for other players. So, the history of the WNBA is it's not nearly as well known as other sports, but they have a pretty robust history of great players already built up. And I hope I'm not going to botch this, but I'm pretty sure Cynthia Cooper has 6 total MVPs. I think she's at the top of that list in the WNBA when you combine regular season and championship MVPs. Because I guess for a few of her seasons, I think there was only one championship game rather than a series. And so when her Ultra from 98 or 99, she had her Ultra 1 of 1 come out. And that hit the old eBay maybe 6 months ago, something like that, maybe a year, somewhere in that range. And I'm pretty sure it sold for about $6,000. And on the one hand, for arguably the GOAT or one of the greatest players of all time, who has very few 1 of 1s from her early seasons, that seems low. But on the other hand, it's $6,000 for a card of a WNBA player. I just don't think that price would have been realized had that sale happened prior to Caitlin Clark. So that's one perspective, is that's a pretty obscure card. I don't if you polled how many people know about Cynthia Cooper's Ultra Masterpiece 1 of 1, very few are going to know about that card, but it's still a really strong number. So there's one piece of evidence. Yeah, go ahead, Zip.
I didn't know about Cynthia Cooper, so
yeah, exactly. So that's a nice price. I'm seeing this Prism stuff and the Select stuff. I mean, God, Caitlin Clark's logging multiple 6-figure sales off of the Select product already, and it's just like when somebody hits one of those, it's like hitting the lottery, hitting the jackpot. Just get this graded, send it to gold, and then let's see how high this thing can go. Yeah. So she's doing really well, but some of the other players are too. Cameron Brink, Angel Reese. I mean, Angel Reese's Prism Gold of her first appearing base head card. I mean, those are going for $2, $3, $4,000 raw. I mean, Clark, her prices are obviously in a different stratosphere, but Diana Taurasi's Prism Black from this year of Prism, I think it did like $4,000 today or yesterday. I mean, some of the prices that are being brought here, I mean, they're not in the NBA world yet. Like the Diana Taurasi comp to the NBA, I'm not sure who that would be, but it'd probably go for more than $4,000 for their first Prism Black. But these prices are getting serious. Yeah, and I have to think it's Caitlin Clark.
And do you think that at some point, anytime soon, people are just going to go back and the stuff from like 1997, 98, 99, 2000, that type of stuff going to become, somewhat popular? Like people are going to start building these sets, or do you just think that like it was kind of overproduced at the time and there's just not?
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I would go take a hard look at some of those very early WNBA releases, especially like the first instance of some of these products. And there's like cool 1 of 1s or like short prints. But how are you going to, it might be difficult to unearth a lot of that stuff. Yeah. And so then I would go back and look at the great historical players too, the Elena Deladons and like some of these players who, if Caitlin Clark really elevates the WNBA, they're going to receive at some point, they're going to receive some of the respect from the fans of the sport who are going to learn about its history and who are going to come to appreciate what these previous players accomplished. So I think there's something to recommend that. Yeah.
And what's interesting on that too is there's people out there with these collections that thought that this was going to be big someday, and now they've passed them on to their family, and their family's like, I have no idea what to do with these. And then like I've ended up with a few of these collections with like basketballs from the first WNBA all-star game, autographed by all the players, like things like that you're starting to find in collections that I'm picking up. And a lot of the cards, that were taught, these early autographed cards from 2000 that are either numbered or autographed or things like that I look at, and I'm grading a lot of it, but I look at them and I say that like, it's unbelievable how low the value is on these cards still compared to any other player in the market. Like Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, you go back and look at their rookie cards, are enormous, but then the GOATs, the people who were there at the very beginning, like people don't even know who they are and wouldn't even go, collect their cards. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's like right on the cusp now, right? It's right there. Like you don't know when it's going to pop and start to go. It could be next year or it could be 10 years from now, right?
Definitely. Well, it'll be fun to see what second year WNBA ratings look like for Clark. I think she's really held the interest of the collectibles market quite well during this offseason. And we're coming up. I mean, when does their season start? It's got to be pretty soon, right?
Yeah. So they'll have the draft in April, and then the season will start soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's right around the corner. Like the player who always caught my attention when I was thinking about maybe picking up a player for the WNBA to PC was Asia Wilson, because she's kind of in this lane right now where, I mean, she's putting up these incredible statistical seasons. She won MVP the most recent season. The season before that, she won the championship and the finals MVP. I mean, she's just got a resume that is really attractive to me in my collector brain. And she's still in the midst of her prime. I mean, she can still add a lot to the legacy, but I think she's at 4 total MVPs. So, I mean, she's within striking distance of getting up there with Cynthia at 6 or even getting to 7.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting to see what happens with that. If it, I mean, what Caitlin has done, for the sport. I mean, selling out all these arenas and it's changed, a lot of changes this offseason, a lot of new coaches, a lot of changeover, a lot of trades, a lot of people being traded around jockeying for now that there's a lot more eyes on the league. Yeah. Markets, what's up, what's down?
Yeah, I mean, over the last month or two, just about everything's up. In fact, the month of February 2025 was the third largest month in aggregate sales volume that we've tracked at Card Ladder, and it very nearly was first. So the highest month is February 2020. The next highest month was December of 2024, very recent. And then now you have the third highest, which was February, which is literally the most recent month. So the level of spending going on is it's at record highs. It's at pandemic level on the secondary market for singles. And then, the price direction. I mean, prices are on average about half of what they were during the peak, but that's not true of all players. That's not true of all categories. And if you sort of look in the shorter term, I mean, if you click on the indexes page on the Card Ladder tab, I mean, it's like 90% of them are green over the last month and the last quarter. So prices are trending up, and volume is just it's staggering. The volume was 247 million for February.
And that's public sales too, right? Yep. So someone like me who is just going to card shows and things like that, all these sales that are happening aren't even part of that.
Exactly. We could call it like a shadow economy, or an economy that happens transactionally. I mean, it's not really private, but it's happening at shows, it's happening at shops, and then there are the private deals as well. But all that stuff, retailers, Walmart, Target, shows, shops, social media, peer-to-peer stuff. We don't get any of that. This is just the public markets on the public marketplaces, and then a handful of private sales that come in that we vet when people report them to us. But overwhelmingly, this is just your eBay, Heritage, Golden, Fanatics, My Slabs, that stuff.
Yeah, it's always interesting, right? I think just the example pops into my head is, the market is what the public market is. But just for example, when we were in Atlanta, I happened to have a card you'll appreciate, Chris, but 97 Metal Universe Jordan Planet Metal PSA 9. I think the highest sale that had been in the last few years was $1,700. I moved it for $2,000. So
sounds about right.
That's not something anybody sees publicly, but
that's the Planet Metal that's like Jordan against like a shiny silverish background, not the orange die cut one.
Yes, with the shiny background, almost has like a pink hue to it.
Yes.
Yep,
love that card. Okay, yeah, I mean that's par for the course. I just, and as strong as prices have been in sports, in the TCG world, particularly Pokemon, you can look at Pikachu's. You can look at Pikachu's index. It's up like 50% over the last 6 months. I'm not particularly plugged into that world, but it's it's on fire right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that whole generation, right, that grew up with that, and now they're young adults, right? And they, with a job and some money in their pocket, and it's just exploded that industry, And not only here, like it is a worldwide phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend in Germany who is telling me that like his local flea markets have tons of Pokemon that he buys and stuff,
You
which
think
is
about
just like
taking a flight?
honestly, they're in Cologne, so like I know that Frankfurt card show happens, so I could definitely go stay with him and go to it with him. That'd be fun. But I don't know if I'd want to go to a card show if I'm over there. Like again, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like there's just so much to do in a place that I'm not in. Yeah, that'd be tough for me. I'd rather like check out every beer hall I could find. But maybe I could do both. Yeah.
Next vintage, what do you think it'll be? And is it generational, just like that Pokemon was? Is it going to be generational for, the next generation, that we're going to be past the Mickey Mantle and that, and we're going to be looking back on, like maybe a 70s or something like that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, if I were of the belief that eventually the generation of people that's nostalgic for a particular era, eventually it ages out. I would be at a real loss trying to explain why the Honus Wagner continues to sell for a higher price with each year that passes. That card's over 110 years old, but it still continues to do better and better. I'm almost of the belief that that there won't be a new vintage. I kind of like to think of the eras of cards as sort of a pre-war, then you have vintage, then you have modern, then you have ultra modern, and then I think when Fanatics' license takes effect for both basketball and football, and they will bring together the baseball, basketball, and football licenses, then I think we need a name. Then I think there's going to be another new era. But I don't know that we'll get a new vintage, but I think that modern era, which I loosely define as starting with Michael Jordan, so 1984 through when Panini took over the basketball license in 09-10. So like that's what I consider modern. I think that modern era, particularly the 90s part of it, it's going to approach over the next decade the people who collect it starting to get into their peak earning power. So peak earning power is like late 40s, early 50s, I think on average. And you're going to start seeing that demographic reach its peak earning power. And when that happens, it does stand to reason that collectors who are in their peak earning power are going to have more money to spend on the cards that they really want. And we all kind of, I think, grasp sort of the irrational desire that collectors can have to want to get the best card or the card that they're most nostalgic for, or something they really need for their collection. And so, when their paycheck starts getting a little bigger, they can throw a little more money at it. Stands to reason that that stuff's going to probably continue to go up.
Yeah, like I'm with you on that. 90s basketball. Like, and I'll say it from a personal story. When Ken and I were in Atlanta, I happened to run across a showcase that had a Jordan Noise Boys BGS 9.5. Hadn't sold publicly in well over around a year. And I bought it. And I was able to get it, I think the last two comps for like 13 and 12. And I got it for 11.5 cash. Since we left Atlanta, it's sold twice for 15 and then 16.8 since Atlanta. And because it did 16.8 on early February on Fanatics on the weekly auction. And Jordan stuff has been going through the roof, especially on Fanatics. Like if you listen to shout out to Cajun Cardboard when he does the weekly rundown of the Fanatics auctions, it's like every week Jordan sets a new record every single week. So I think you're spot on, and that's what we've talked about before. Is the folks that are, again, early 30s to 40s and early 40s now that are starting to get into that peak earning power for them are willing to, do what I did that day when I saw a card that I really wanted and I may not see again. And I got into the pocket and I pulled it out and I paid for it. And, that's what I think will eventually happen and drive that market even crazier at some point.
Yeah.
So you just proved it right there. That's what drives that market. A guy with a job and a paycheck, right?
Yeah, exactly. that card is not to ever go in a showcase. It's over there in a box. Yeah. And
I love Noise Boys. I picked up my first and only copy in 2018. I was actually sitting in class, and I bid on it. And I won it for about $4,000. It was a PSA 10. And I ended up selling it about a year later so I could consolidate into the copy of the 98 Rubies that I would pick up that I still have. That's about 6 years ago now. So I consolidated it into that Rubies, and I really ended up selling it for like the same I paid for it. I basically bought it for $4,000, sold it for $4,000. I mean, the most recent PSA 10 sales in that card, I think, are like 30, 38 grand, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 31, and then I think one with Mike Baker Diamond did closer to 40.
Yep.
That's wild.
Yep. So, I mean, just the difference there between 6-7 years ago and now it's multiples. It's almost an order of magnitude.
Yeah. And even still the difference, that's why I was interested by that most recent BGS sale, because it kind of closed the gap a little bit there. Because my copy has a 10 subgrade. And that's what the one that just sold did not have any 10 subgrades. And it wasn't a true gem either. Mine's not a true gem. It's got a 9 as well, but it's so that's interesting. I'm curious when a BGS true gem comes up, what it might do.
It'll be interesting. Yeah, I mean that one is just such a great looking. I mean, that's the thing about 90s Jordan is that the design elements that they used were just I don't even think they've been replicated even today. And I know Upper Deck has worked a little bit with Jean Arena, she was one half of the design team that was designing a lot of that stuff for Fleer and Skybox in the 90s. She's on Instagram too under Arena Design. You can ask her questions about whatever, and she's pretty responsive. But I love that Noise Boys card. It's one of the best.
What do you think the ceiling on that sort of stuff is? So, like, we just talked about what it just did in this little bit of time, right? And then, because at this rate that you guys are talking about, let's be honest, like 90, some high 90% of people probably priced out of that stuff already, like realistically. So, what do you think that caps at? And then after, it's so crazy to think about. We're talking about the next vintage, and then it's like, well, what after that is gonna pop? And then it's like it's a rabbit hole. So yeah, just curious. I know I just threw out a couple things, but just what do you think?
What do you think, Tyler, as someone who currently owns the Noise Boys?
What'll be interesting to see, like, and you almost have to reset the market, right? Because the COVID thing did what it did to all of that. And I think back to even like the 86 Fleer for Jordan, and then getting into vintage baseball, like how quickly it popped, that once that started to happen, it went. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty high, right? The thing that I remember the most about the 86 Fleer is as a kid, I think I was like 11 or 12 years old, and I go to an auction with my grandparents and my mom and dad, and they have an 86 Fleer PSA 10 in this, I'm from a very rural community, at this random auction, and this thing is up for $1,500. And I'm like, I have $500 that I've saved up, and I'm begging them to give me the other $1,000 to buy this card. and they wouldn't do it. And in every chance I've ever got a chance as an adult to remind them that, that would have been one of the greatest returns on investment in their entire life, I do.
Oh my gosh.
But that like just how quickly that goes, right? I hear people talking about, how they could buy 52 tops Mantles, in the late, even in the late 80s, especially low grade stuff and, raw for, numbers that'll make your head spin. Today, and and keep me honest, Chris, you probably may know this, the one PSA 10 copy of the Mantle, the guy, what did he pay in like the 70s? People thought it was nuts. Like he paid like 30 grand or something at that time. And it's a, multi-million-dollar card.
Yeah, it's the 52 tops Mansell PSA 10. That's probably 30 plus million.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember which one of the collectors that has one of the copies. It's because it's not the Diamondbacks owner's copy. It's the
Marshall Fogel, maybe.
Maybe that may be the copy. I think he's had it for a long, long time.
Yeah, good luck frying it out. That's the
small
thing.
like black box or something.
Yeah. I think that's Fogel.
I think that is, yeah. And whatever the story is, like he bought it in, way before anybody was thinking to buy that, and paid what was considered an astronomical number at the time, and it's 1000x'd. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I would say there's still, again, as I said, talked about the weekly Fanatics auction. If you look at that and you look at the Jordans that are selling every single week, there's at least one record set every week, if not multiples. So Jordan, really to answer your question, for me, it's, I think we've got years of runway because there's guys like me. I just turned 38, and I'm willing to buy that Noise Boys today. It's talking about your peak earning power. I've got, 10, 12 years where I'm going to earn more and more in the rest of my career. And that 11 grand I spent on Noise Boys might turn into God knows what. My wife will probably kill me, but that's what could happen.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, because I feel like at the basis of it, like obviously the sets and everything is important, but really it comes down to the players that are so highly collectible. It's almost like you focus on that first and then expand into the sets. Like it's really like you could just think and talk about it forever about what could do this or that. It's weird. It's interesting to think about.
And a lot of it is nostalgia too, right? It's like if you watch these guys play, right? And then you get older and you've got money and you say, that's what I want. When we all take time out of the hobby, right? We all jumped back into the hobby. When we came back in, what did we feel was important to us? We didn't want to buy what everybody else was buying, right? We bought some of it, but then we remembered back. We go to a card show, and you start looking at cards and you're like, oh, I watched this guy play, or I was a huge fan of this guy or whatever. And if it happened to be, Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or something like that, right? Now your taste just got, much more expensive than if it was somebody else. But that's what it really comes down to, is watching people play and watching the values of those cards go up. And this hobby, they're really, when you say ceiling, what ceiling? Because there's somebody that's like, I don't care. I'm going to put a bid on it to make sure I win this card. I don't care what cost it is. I want to own this card. And we see a sale and we're like, oh my God, $1 million or $800,000. How could that be? Right. But then most of the time, we say, just like you said, now is he paid that, but now 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, that could be worth $5 million or $8 million. Right.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess I would flip this question back to Chris on this. So when you think about, Jordan being that gateway into that world, the same way I guess Mantle was the gateway in for what we say classic vintage today, and how Mantle's market drastically changed how much we paid for Willie Mays, how much we, paid for Jackie Robinson, how much we are willing to, now pay for like a Sandy Koufax rookie, or just any of that really 50s era vintage. Does Jordan, as these record sales keep happening, does some of that trickle down effect happen into the rest of the Noise Boys set or the rest of the Planet Metal set? You know, I think you already see it in really special sets like the PMGs and stuff like that. But when it gets into even smaller insert sets, because I think that's going to be what will be the collecting set in the future. If we're staying in this world, it won't be the full card set. It'll be those insert sets. Does it start to make those guys become more desirable? And is that a decent investment opportunity? You know, kind of flipping it back from that mindset.
Yeah, it does. I still think it's going to be a player-by-player thing, even outside of Michael Jordan. There's going to be some players who just do better than others. I mean, Dennis Rodman has multiple six-figure sales. You know, just think about that. He had a PMG green sale. He had a few PMG green sales in the roughly $200,000 range, and then he had a credentials go for even more, get close to $250,000. I mean, it's Dennis Rodman. You know. A cultural icon and somebody who's maintained a lot of relevance. But I mean, was he ever even the third best player on a championship team? I mean, you could say that he certainly wasn't Jordan or Scotty, but you know, maybe you could say he was the third best. I mean, that's a phenomenal price for a guy who was never anywhere close to being a league MVP. So, you know, there's a lot of just contingent factors that go into it. And by contingent, I mean, it's all about, like what Big Ken was saying, which players are bringing the nostalgia to the collectors who are coming back. And Dennis Rodman, he just conjures up a lot of nostalgia for people. So, you know, Dennis Rodman, I mean, so we trickle down and we look at Noise Boys and Jambalaya and Planet Metal and Platinum Portraits, and you know, we start looking at some of these other sets and say, well, after the Michael Jordan domino falls and he sort of becomes cost prohibitive, who next? I sure wouldn't have guessed Dennis Rodman, but Dennis Rodman's doing really well. You know, when I look back on the '90s, the player who I'm most nostalgic for, in tandem with Michael Jordan, is Hakeem Olajuwon. And that's just an accident of history. I mean, it's because as I was, you know, reaching 8-9 years old, that was when Hakeem was winning his 2 championships and his MVP. So it just so happened to line up that MJ was out. I was really starting to fall in love with the sport, and Hakeem was the best player, and it just all kind of fit. So Hakeem is a guy who I would look at as somebody who, you know, people like myself might have a lot of nostalgia for, but it's really hard to predict these things and hard to figure out who it is. But if it were me, and I've toyed with this idea before, I've toyed with the idea of starting a Hakeem PC or a David Robinson collection. Robinson was not a guy who I was really passionate about when I was collecting as a kid, but his numbers just jump off the page when I go back and review that era. So Robinson's a guy who really impresses me now as I look back and I have the point of view on basketball that I have today. Robinson's a guy who jumps out, but who knows? I mean, who knows who it would be that will come next, the next domino to fall. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to think that as Jordan becomes, you know, cost prohibitive, people will want to have their next favorite player from that set.
Yeah, like the one for me that sticks out is and it gets no hobby love, but Tim Duncan.
I was literally thinking it, man.
Right,
it was in my head, right? Yeah.
If I sit here and give you position by position a starting 5 of the greatest of all time, he's number 1 at power forward, and nobody collects him at all. Like, there are a very small amount of people that most of us don't even know, and so that's what I was getting at with that question, and I think you said it perfectly. But just where do you move once Jordan becomes too expensive? Once Kobe becomes too expensive, you know, where is that next step? And you know, to me, I think Hakeem, you see it in kind of especially his auto market, because he signs a fair amount, so you see those do really good numbers. And then but like Duncan, or you know, and then I guess the other guy that I would think of that's similar to Rodman would be AI.
Yeah,
he just had a
AI
massive sale.
Get that kind of love at times.
Yeah, Allen Iverson just had his credentials out of 3 from 97 sell for $750,000, I think.
Yeah.
And it outsold a Kobe.
Yeah.
It was out of 8. And
Yeah,
I was listening to with Brett and Stacking Slabs. Yep. And they were talking about that, and it was really interesting. And the nuance of that was, I think, greening on the Kobe. But yeah.
Well,
really
the AI would be lower number too, right? Because the numbering is based on jersey number.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So the Kobe was out of 8, but that was the first time one of those Kobe's had sold in 15 years, and it's still a massive price. The Kobe was around $560, I think, or $580. But yeah, it had some discoloration, and there's 8 of them. But yeah, the Iverson price was staggering. I mean, there's a lot of iconic players from the 90s. Tim Duncan's a great call out. There were guys like Anthony Hardaway and Grant Hill. I mean, so many kids followed them who, would have strong feelings, sentimentality about them. Yeah,
Shaq.
there's a treasure trove of 90s play. Shaq, oh my God. Yeah, I mean, Shaq is – but he's got a pretty strong market too. I mean, he's got some 6-figure sales of late as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to answer this whole segment or wrap this segment up is a quote by the GOAT, MJ. The ceiling is the roof.
Hey, Chris, before we let you go, we can't let you go without asking anything new coming with Card Ladder, anything exciting, anything we can expect, something you're working on?
We have a new feature that came out about a month ago that lets you that basically lets you put on autopilot in the collection feature, tracking the value of any graded card. So before, in order to get tracking of a graded card, you really had just a few options. You could either the card was already in the ladder and we were vetting sales for it, and then you could just add it to your profile. That was easy. But if we weren't tracking it in the ladder, then you had to input your information and then set up an index and model the pricing, sort of rather than following the exact sales trajectory of the card. But now Josh built a new feature that's just amazing, where now even if the card isn't in the ladder, if you have a graded card, you just add it to your collection, and then when it prompts you, how would you like to track the value? I think it's called graded card magic or graded card tracking, something along those lines. And you can just click that, and then it's on autopilot. Every time a new sale of that card comes into sales history, we'll automatically update your collection for you. That's just a huge feature. I mean, we track around 60 to 70,000 cards, but there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of cards that we don't track. So now the collection tracking feature lets you set on autopilot tracking for any graded card you've got.
Nice.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Oh, Tyler, you want to bring up the question about the why things may not pop up here but pop up otherwhere? You're gonna word it way better than I just did.
Yeah, probably just a kind of a under the hood question for anybody who's listening. But occasionally you'll run into situations where I primarily use Card Ladder, but somebody will say, "Well, I see a sale over here." When they're using 130 point or when they scan on alt, and really it was the one that really triggered me the other day was a Baker Mayfield Kaboom. Like I could not find I found a sale in Card Ladder, but then there was like 2 more sales in 130 point, and I'm just kind of curious what drives, why that discrepancy happens, or just maybe help explain that for anybody else who would experience that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Could be for a few different reasons. One reason could be that we removed it because we got information that it went unpaid. So that happens. We get reports of that for various cards every day. But the other option that it could be, and I think this is going to apply to the Baker Kaboom, it's either going to be that, whatever the search term being used is, it might not be properly triggering the sale in our database, but it might actually be bringing it up in 130 point. 130 has a cool feature where if your search isn't perfectly responsive, it'll still give you it'll say like no results, but here are some similar sales. And I've had people reach out to me a few times and say, hey, when I put this search into 130 in Card Ladder, it doesn't pull anything up, but 130 gives me the similar sales, and that's actually what I was looking for. And so that sometimes happens too, where like our search bar is a little too sensitive based on what the search query is. So that can happen too sometimes. And we'll work on that. And we're continuing to work on that to make the search bar optimal. Or the other option, which happens sometimes too, is sometimes we just, for whatever reason, we don't grab a sale. It doesn't happen often, but over the, almost 5 years we've been doing this, it has happened where there was just a sale, it happened, and we didn't grab it. And so when that does happen, anytime that happens, Tyler, whether it's yourself, Zip, Ken, anybody, you can literally just send me a DM on Instagram. Just say, hey, this is showing up in Instagram, or this is showing up in 130, or this is showing up in eBay, and it's not showing up in Card Ladder. Do you know what's going on? And give me a couple minutes, and I can usually figure out which of those scenarios it is. So, and we rely on the community to help us with that too. So, but yeah, anybody out there, anybody listening, any of the three gentlemen up here on the screen with me, if you do encounter that situation, just shoot me a DM on Instagram, and we'll get it figured out quickly.
And with saying that, where can people reach you if they have questions for you, if they want to reach out?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place by far. And my name on there is just Chris_HOJ, which stands for House of Jordans. So Chris_HOJ.
Great. Chris, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Appreciate you spending some time with us tonight.
I really appreciate the invite. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get you back on.
Oh, absolutely. I'm thinking right in the midst of the playoffs, we get him in here, get him all jazzed up, see where Santi's at.
Let's go. We'll have to look back on that and see how horrible of a pick that was.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week with a brand new episode of the Hobby Chop podcast. Have a good night, fellas.
See ya.